get to speak about my very favorite topic in autism. And she asked me what it was, and I told her, and she just went, oh, I see. My name is Cathy Saul. I wear any number of hats, but the hat I'm wearing when I come to you tonight is the manager of the Infant and Child Development Services Program, and someone who has been working with children with autism and their families. I hesitate to tell you this, but it's now over 40 years. So it's been my career for a long time, and I'm still entirely passionate about the work, and I'm very grateful to Robin and Ted for the opportunity to come and talk to you about this particular approach to treatment, which is near and dear to my heart. But before we start, I have to tell you a very, very funny story. Long time ago, and I can tell you that it was exactly 27 years ago, I was returning to work from maternity leave. That's how I know it was 27 years ago. And I worked for the regional municipality of York at that time, and we had offices in this building. And my very first day back to work after maternity leave, I live in Newmarket. So I'm driving up Woodbine Avenue, approaching the building, and I'm stopped at the intersection of Woodbine and Ravenshoe in the, I don't know, I'm gonna say I was in the right-hand lane, and beside me in the left-hand lane was a station wagon. And I looked in the station wagon and I thought, my goodness, that's a very unusual looking dog that they have in the front seat of their station wagon. Well, guess what? It was not a dog, it was a goat. So in 19, whatever year that was, as I was driving to work in the very town of Keswick at the very intersection, some enterprising person had a goat in their station wagon, and I thought, this is an interesting community to work in. So I will never forget that story, and as I drove up here, it came into my mind as I sat at the lights. So, we're not going to talk about goats. We're going to talk about parent coaching, and we're going to talk about pivotal response treatment. And I am not a formal presenter. I will ask you questions, and they really are questions. I'm looking for your thoughts and ideas. You may ask me questions at any time. I will not promise that I will remember where I was, so I will say to you, where was I? And you will redirect me back to where we were in the presentation. But please ask questions. This is informal, as much as I can make it so. Advance the slides. No, I don't want to go that far. I want to go here. The pivotal response treatment is based on the science of applied behavior analysis. There are lots of programs that are based on that same science, and I would like to say that this science has been around for a long, long time, and it's well supported by research, and that's important for you to know. It's not snake oil. It's not something that I made up. It's not even something that the originators, the developers of this program made up. The science of applied behavior analysis has been around longer than me. 1927, people remember Pavlov and his dogs, trained the dogs, he fed them, rang a bell just before he fed the dogs, learned that the dogs would salivate because they thought they were going to eat, they started to drool, and soon the dogs would drool just from the bell. There didn't even need to be food. That was the beginning of this science. Went on through a whole bunch more scientists. The first scientist who used applied behavior analysis in the treatment of children with autism was Ivar Lovaas, who has a bad reputation because he used a lot of punishment in his treatment. And certainly that is a part of applied behavior analysis, but we've grown long past that. We don't use punishment anymore, and if anybody does, well, I would say they should be shot, but that's a little bit of a negative statement on my part. That's pretty punishing. In the 80s, we turned to stuff using the same science around language, and in the late 80s, early 90s, pivotal response treatment was born, I think we could say. The first paper was in 1988, and it's been replicated many, many times since. So we learn things like We use things like drills, where kids sat across the table from an instructor and learned to touch red or name a president or do a multiplication table that really were academic skills that probably were not the best way to start for 3-year-olds, but that's how it was used back in the beginning. We've moved into, much as Robin and Ted offer here, treatment in natural environments. This is a play environment. Children play here. And we know now that with the right motivations, you can change things that are pivotal skills, hence pivotal skills treatment, or however you would like to call it. Treatment, techniques. I said there was a lot of, oh my goodness, go back. I have a left-handed mouse. And I never remember that when I don't have my mouse. Lots and lots of studies about ABA and PRT, 200 of them since 1987. PRT is one of the very few treatments that are recommended by the Canadian Pediatric Society. It's one of 11 treatments recommended in the States by the National Autism Center. There was a new study last year when I did this presentation of infants 7 to 15 months old who made significant progress when their parents were taught how to change daily routines to incorporate social engagement. Paper from the Canadian Pediatric Society in 2011. So there's lots and lots of research. Like I said, it's not something I made up. It's not even something that the originators, the authors of this treatment made up. It doesn't like that. It likes, I'll get it right. There we go. So why is motivation such a critical component? Like I said, I've been doing this business for 40 years. I've worked with a lot of children. I have 5 of my own. I kind of think I've been around a little bit, understanding how children learn and develop. It seems that something is missing in some of our little people with autism, that drive to communicate, that drive to share attention with their parents is not working the way we would expect it to. And so in order to teach things, we need something outside of the child to motivate them. And if we can figure out what a child is really interested in, what they really want access to more than anything in the world, we can use that to teach almost anything. Almost anything. I've already talked about research. You need to know about Robert and Lynn Kegel. Koegel should be in your handouts as the authors of this. Developed in the belief that all humans possess characteristics that are important for learning, and that's what the Kegels call pivotal behaviors. At Early Intervention Services in York Region, where I am the manager, our focus in using PRT is in teaching very first words, which is not to say that you can't use the principles of PRT to teach almost anything. But where we start is with first words, because a lot of our little children that we see who either have a diagnosis of autism or are waiting, or we think probably that's the diagnosis they're gonna have no words. They don't have language that they use effectively to communicate, so that's a gap that we can start to fill. Every day I get up at 6:30 a.m. and I put on my running shoes and I go outside and I walk for 30 minutes. What in God's name is my motivation to do such a thing? Any guesses?
No.
Breakfast.
Pardon me?
Breakfast.
No, it's not breakfast, but that's a good guess.
No.
Health, absolutely. I'm old. I am very old, and if I do not take care of my health at this point in time, and I have a desk job, I walk for 30 minutes, I may not walk very much at all again through the rest of the day. That's my motivation. I want to stay healthy, therefore I get up in the dark and I go out in the cold. Yesterday I got soaking wet, but my health is a big enough motivation for me. May not be a big enough motivation for you to get up at 6:30 and go out in the dark in your running shoes. Those of you who have paid employment, get out of bed and get dressed and go to work. Why? Money, absolutely. You may also love your job. That's a good motivator. But even if you don't love your job and you still get up every morning and go, because the motivation is a paycheck. Whether it's every week, every 2 weeks, every month, you go because there's a paycheck. That's part of your motivation. And so when we can look at a little person and figure out what they're doing, what in their play, what in their interactions is motivating to them, then we have the clue. Then we have the key, and then we can move forward with helping them learn something new. The key also to remember, much as this little girl has an enormous ice cream to anticipate, and that's her motivation for whatever's going on for her, when we use PRT, we do not make children work for every little crumb. We play a lot. We just play and have fun a lot. And every once in a while, we have a raised expectation for a skill. At early intervention services, the skill we're looking for is a sound. But we're not asking, we don't hold hostage everything that child wants and make them work for every penny. We play a lot. And occasionally, we will interrupt our play to insist on a vocalization. Does that make sense so far? We're not teasing, we're not taunting, we're not bribing, we're playing with what the child wants to play with, not what we want to play with, and probably not even in the way that we think we should be playing. We're following that child and what they are motivated with, and every once in a while in our play, we expect a vocalization usually. Now, don't hit the enter button, hit that button. There, see, I got it, only took 3 buttons. My motivation is to not look like an idiot up here. So there's applied behavior analysis. That's A, B, and C, very simple. Antecedent, what comes before, behavior that we're interested in, and what's the consequence. And in PRT, the antecedent is always that we have control of something the child wants. The behavior, when we use it at early intervention in a group, is at directed intentional vocalization, and we can take that apart. But it could be anything. It could be tying your shoes, could be walking up the stairs, could be using the toilet, could be any skill that we're trying to teach. And in PRT, the consequence is the child gets exactly what it is that he wanted. So you're not giving Smarties because they tied their shoes. You're giving them outside play if that's what they wanted because they tied their shoes. If they ask you for a cookie, you give them a cookie. You don't give them a train. If they ask for a train, you give them a train, not a cookie. It's all about the motivation. What is it that that child wants to work for? And how do you know? Because you've watched the child and you've figured out what their motivation is. So the journey, that button, of pivotal response treatment in York Region, and we're still a pioneer, started like this. At early intervention services, we had a whole lot of children who either had autism or looked like they probably needed that diagnosis. And we had a whole lot of staff, and we wanted to do the best thing for those children. So we researched a lot of treatment options and opportunities, and we found PRT, and we thought it was magnificent. And so we hired people from Kegel and Kegel in the University of California to come up and train our staff. So in June of 2010, we paid them to come to York Region. I'm trying to remember where we were. In Newmarket at 62 Bayview, and we trained 100 people. We trained all of the staff at early intervention services. We trained some community partners. We trained some speech language pathologists. We did 2 days of intensive training about this. And that was all well and good, and we liked it, and we thought everybody took an exam to get some certification, including me. I wrote an exam, and we started to apply it. And then the Hospital for Sick Children said, we have a little bit of money. We like this idea. We're gonna have an intensive week-long training for 15 families and 15 professionals. And they called me on the phone and said, well, here you've done some training on PRT. Would you be interested in participating in what we're doing? It's free, they said. I went, oh, perhaps. What are you offering me? And they said, you can have one family and you can have one professional. I said, oh, okay. Who do you think that professional should be? I said to Hospital for Sick Children. Should it be one of my staff? I'm like, I'd like to go, but he said, nope, I think it should be you. And I went, oh crap. And then I had to go looking for a family. We looked everywhere and we found Robin and Ted. So Ted and I, for a week, went to Hospital for Sick Children, learned all day long, went home at night, and we had to be videotaped. I videotaped Ted videotaped me in Robin's house with their son, and that's how I learned way more about how PRT works. And I was gonna say Anthony, their son that I worked with, and I are old friends, but that's not true. He didn't like me much at all, because I wasn't very good at it in the beginning, and he really wanted a lot of stuff, and every time I figured out what he wanted, and I took control of that thing, it was not a good scene. It was not a good scene until he figured it out. And I'll tell you the story of how he figured it out if we have time. So that was so successful, I said to my boss at the time, I need to learn more about this. If we're gonna do this and we're gonna do this right, I said, I have to go to Arizona and see it in action in groups with people. And he said, I can't give you very much money and I can't give you very much time. It's regional government we're talking about here. And I said, okay, I'll go for cheap. I'll share my hotel room and I'll be back in 48 hours. And he said, all right. So I went to Arizona in the dead of November and it was still 110 degrees. And I watched what they did there. And on the plane, on the way home, I wrote a curriculum and I wrote a program outline and said, I can't wait to start. So that was November. In March 2012, we had our first group at Early Intervention Services. So it's almost 10 years that we've been doing this kind of work. In Arizona, the Southwest Autism Research and Resource Center, otherwise known as SARC, they trained the whole province of Nova Scotia on this method in 2006. They don't use it now, but at that point in time, now, if you got government funded services in Nova Scotia, you got PRT. So, that's how that happened. 40 years ago, I was volunteering in a school-based classroom. That was my beginning, but that wasn't 2010. Those children that I worked with are now in their 40s or 50s. That's a little bit hard for me to remember. So March 2012, we had our first group. By September 2018, we were running group number 21. And now we run those groups a little bit differently, and I don't get to participate anymore because now I'm the manager, not the supervisor, but it continues to run. The only difference is now we offer coaching to individual families at home. So we can build the principles into your daily routines.
Sorry, but
Yep.
so you guys go to the houses?
I'll talk more about that.
Okay.
The model that we use is based largely on what we saw in Arizona. We have groups of parents together once a week for 6 weeks, and then we offer individual coaching along with those 6 weeks of parent education.
Is it an age limit or?
So at Early Intervention Services, and this is important to know, we offer this group to families who have very young children that are our clients at the time and are not talking.
Because at early intervention, there's one in Cathy,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
My
we have an
son
office
got
in Cathy.
dismissed from there because
Okay.
of going off to kindergarten.
Mhm.
And then that's why I said, is this part of age limit?
Yes,
Because
yes.
I know they got dismissed
Yes.
because he was
We-
like 3.
We discharge children when they start school. That's the ministry rule.
Yeah. So does this count? Or no?
No, because he's too old now if
Yeah.
he's at school.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
home base is different.
But The home-based program is only offered to children before they start school.
Oh.
That's the difference, yes.
So is it offered through EIS or through the speech and language program?
It's offered through EIS,
Interesting.
yes.
Okay.
Hence, me being the manager.
Yeah.
Not of the speech program.
Right.
More questions? Please do interrupt. Oh, I did it again, I hit the wrong button.
No, you didn't, you're on the right one.
I turned over too many pages. There we go. This particular little saying usually is at the end of my presentation, so I'm surprised it's in here. But it's okay. So although when Early Intervention Services offers the PRT groups, our main goal is to teach first words, we know that when we target the pivotal skill of motivation, this has widespread positive effects on other areas that we didn't target, including attention. We see children's attention increase to an activity and to the partner that they're working with. We see eye contact get better, and we're not working on it. We see self-regulation. Children get better at understanding cause and effect and their own personal behavior, so they don't tend to get as upset, and they understand how the reinforcement piece works. As they learn to talk and vocalize more clearly, temper tantrums and negative behaviors decrease, and we also see that their play skills increase. Because we have their attention, because they're motivated by whatever the activity is, we can teach them how that toy could work or another way to play that they may not have yet. Before this program started, one of the things that I used to participate in and really love was the Hannon program, More Than Words. So I co-facilitated that program many times with the speech pathologist from the York Region Speech and Language Program. And the development of the PRT program had all of the good things from it, from More Than Words. There was parent education in a group, there was individual coaching at home, there was lots of opportunity to practice, and all we did was just, we said we called it More Than Words on steroids. A little bit more, a little bit bigger, a little bit better. So why is parent coaching, and I mean parent coaching in general, I often start the PRT groups with a demonstration of coaching. Many of us have played team sports, many of us have had good teachers, and hopefully some of you have experienced really good coaching. What does that look like, really good coaching? What would that mean to you if I said really good coaching?
Hands-on, one-to-one.
Hands-on, one-to-one, okay, that's part of it. What? Sorry?
Motivating.
Motivating? What does a good coach say to you? Yeah, and encourages you, tells you when you've done it right, tells you what to fix when you've done it wrong, right? Gives you some direction, some idea about what might be different that you could do. So here's my age again. Used to be, when I did a home visit, I would sit on the floor and play with a child and encourage a parent to participate and watch and try this and maybe this will work. That's not really coaching, that's demonstrating. Parent coaching means I watch you play with your child and offer suggestions if you want them, right? It's a whole different approach. The coach may go out on the ice and say, try holding your stick this way if you're playing hockey. He might stand behind you and arrange your shoulders so that you're holding the stick correctly. Might watch you as you try and take a shot and say, hold your stick higher, hold your stick lower, turn your, whatever he might say, right? There are lots of ways to coach. What we know is that children learn best when they have a really good relationship with the person they're working with. Children have a much better relationship with their parents than they would with any worker. 100%, right? Really important.
Except they act worse.
There's that. So, there's that. Absolutely true. But I may come, the early interventionist, a therapist, anybody may come and work with your child for an hour a week, a few hours a day. That child lives with you. You are the one who has the most opportunity to make a difference in that child's life. So I have the best opportunity of making a difference in that child's life if I help you. And that's the principle of PRT. We also know that sometimes for children on the autism spectrum, what's really missing is the connection between their behavior and the impact it has on the world. They may not understand how to get the things they want or not get the things they don't want very well. And so what we teach them when we're teaching first words is that their voice has power. That we're gonna respond, even if we don't understand what it is they've tried to say, we're gonna make it our best guess and give them what it is we think that they want, so that they learn that connection between their behavior and our action, our reaction. This maybe is the biggest one here, competence. It's really hard to know what's going on inside a child's head before they have language. When any child is really little before they learn to talk, we guess that they might want a banana as opposed to an orange for lunch, or they might want these pajamas as opposed to those pajamas, or the truck as opposed to the car. We make our best guess based on what we observe them doing. But what we sometimes don't do when a child has a significant disability related to autism is we don't assume that they are competent. We assume they don't understand. We assume they're not listening. We assume they can't learn, perhaps. And that's the biggest mistake we make, and that's what we don't do in PRT. We assume a child is competent, that they can learn, they do understand, and often much more than we don't. So here are some quotes from some parents who have participated in our group. Parents said, "I've changed the way I play with him and followed his lead." Every family that has a child with ASD should have the PRT program. I've learned about how to play with my child. He learned how to make a sound, a first sound instead of an upset sound. And they thought